I made a video recently discussing the default designs of Marvel Rivals' base roster, where I was largely positive. In this video, I'll be discussing some of the comic-inspired alternate costumes in Marvel Rivals, and I'll be mostly negative. The reason for this is simple. Rivals' default designs are original designs, and as original designs, I'm more than fine with them trying new ideas and being their own thing. But that doesn't apply to what are supposed to be established looks from the comics. Rivals has a severe issue with how it adapts costumes from the comic books, making heavy changes to the point that some barely even resemble their source material. The game directly credits its comic-inspired costumes with their first appearance, which is nice, but it often exposes just how inaccurate these suits are. And these citations are sometimes a little strange, or in some cases flat out wrong. My goal here is to go through the costumes that I think suffer from these issues the most. I will not be discussing recolors here. There are many recolors based on designs from the comics, many of which really should have been their own separate outfits, but they're just recolors, so I don't really care about them that much. Unlike all my other costume videos, I will not be assigning scores to the suits. I'm not going to be focusing too much on the costume's quality or my personal interest in them. I'm really trying to focus on how the designs were adapted from the comics. Whether or not the suit looks good isn't really the point. The point is to demonstrate the issues with how the suits are adapted. I've seen a lot of lame-brain defenses for the design changes this game makes, so I'll address those arguments here at the beginning. That way it's impossible for people not to see them, and I won't have to constantly address them in the comments. If you just want to get to the costumes, feel free to skip ahead using YouTube's chapter system. Argument 1. You just don't like it because it isn't one-to-one to the comics. This is an incredibly disingenuous argument because I don't think costumes need to be one-to-one. Sometimes changes need to be made to an extent when adapting costumes. That's part of the process with adaptations. Things have to be adapted to fit the new medium they're in. Certain differences can be fine as long as the core idea and appeal of the suit is intact. But as you'll see later in the video, the costumes in Rivals do not make minor changes, they make major overhauls to the point where some of them are completely different things. Argument 2. You can still tell what the costumes are supposed to be, so it's fine. This is a logical fallacy. To demonstrate why, I've used a certain comparison online a lot, so I'll use it again here. This is clearly supposed to be Sonic the Hedgehog, so that means it's fine. You see how dumb that sounds? I'm not saying that the designs of Rivals are as bad looking as Sonic, since most of them still do manage to look cool. I'm just pointing out how flawed the argument itself is, since the problem is that it's really not the same thing, and being able to recognize what it's supposed to be is not enough to call it a good adaptation. Also, many of the adaptations in Rivals are not recognizable as their comic counterparts, so this flawed argument doesn't even apply to some of the suits. Argument 3. It looks cool, so it's not a problem. An adapted costume looking cool is not always an acceptable reason to change its design. Don't get me wrong, comics are not infallible. Some comic costumes do look stupid or boring, and changing them dramatically can be beneficial. But in most cases, costumes from the comics either already look good or would only need minor changes to reach their full potential. Rivals drastically reimagined some suits that don't really need it, so while their new take may be appealing in its own way, it often lacks the appeal of the original, and in some rare cases, Rivals actually makes some suits look worse than they did in the comics. Argument 4. Rivals characters are from a different universe, so that's why these suits look different. Well, gee, pal. You know what else is considered a different universe? Every Marvel game ever made. They're all different universes. That's not an excuse for the alternate suits looking wrong. I understand this line of thinking for the default designs, but not the alternate ones, since the point of alternate costumes from different sources is to look the way they did in the original source. Especially since the suits in Rivals are literally cited as being the designs from the original comic issues. Argument 5. If Rivals changed the comic citations from first appeared in to inspired by, then it would make everything okay. Sure, this wording would be more fitting since the costumes are clearly taking inspiration from the comics instead of being accurate replicas, But this still doesn't work for me because it's just using semantics to avoid the core issue. I don't care what wording they use, costumes should look the way they're supposed to. Marvel's Avengers hid behind their usage of "inspired by" to try and pass off their crap comic adaptations, but that wording wasn't an excuse there and shouldn't be used as an excuse here. In fact, Rivals already uses the "inspired by" phrase on the promotional images for costumes from the MCU, and those ones are trying to be accurate replicas. So do you see what I mean when I say that these are just words and that changing which ones are used won't really matter? I think that about covers it for counter-arguments. Now we can move on to the actual video. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, and let's get started. Let's start with a relatively unproblematic design, Punisher's Thunderbolts costume. The main issue here is that I have no idea why this isn't just a recolor. That's what this suit was in the comics, Punisher's normal getup, but with a red skull instead of a white one. Instead, Rivals transformed this into a completely new design. The costume itself is fine, too over-designed for my taste with all the lights and stuff, and the shade of red is more pinkish than I would like, but the main problem is simply that this is not the same suit as the one from the comics. If this suit was renamed Thunderbolts 2099 or something, I wouldn't be here complaining. All they had to do was recolor his default, take away the face paint, and this could have been avoided. Next is Punisher 2099. Here's how it looked in the comics, and I think you can already spot a couple changes. Before I start whining, let me say what I like about Rivals' rendition of the suit. The armor throughout the suit looks cool. I like how they kept the almost thunderbolt-shaped eyes of his skull symbol. Removing the teeth crotch guard was smart, since I think that looked really silly. I like how they kept the big shoulder pads and the collar, since I think those are really important to the design. So yeah, those are the good parts. Now then, why does he have a mask? He very much did not have a mask in the comics. His suit actually had some tech in it that would censor his face from cameras with a pixelated skull, which is so silly I can't help but love it. But he didn't have a physical mask. There is a version of Punisher 2099 that did wear a mask, but that was from a different continuity. It was a different guy. So it's not really relevant. I'm just bringing it up here in case anyone tries to bring it up as a defense. But all that aside, the mask looks cool, and if that was the only thing, then I'd honestly still be fine with the suit. It wouldn't be ideal, but it would be acceptable. But then we have another issue. Why is he green? No, seriously, why is the suit green? I mean, just look at the original comic art, he's clearly not green. He's got the same thing Spider-Man 2099 had, where his suit is black, but it's colored with blue highlights so it looks blue, but it is supposed to be black. So maybe they didn't want the suit to be black, and wanted to give it some more color to stand out from his other costumes. But if that's the case, then just make it blue? Literally the day the suit was revealed, I edited the green to be blue, and I think it looks way better that way. Now, you might say that the green is there because Frank was a soldier, so the suit is trying to lean into that, but that doesn't apply to Punisher 2099 since that's not Frank. It's a completely different guy named Jake Gallows who was not a soldier. Gallows was only ever a police officer, so green wouldn't make sense for him. But blue would. And the last thing I have to say on this color issue is that the green, white, and red together makes the suit look Christmas themed, which I think is kinda silly. Hawkeye's Ronin suit does look pretty cool. However, it is credited as being the original Ronin suit from the New Avengers book, even though the suit's mask makes it clear that this is actually an adaptation of the costume from Hawkeye Freefall. That's really my only issue with this thing, it's not cited correctly. People have offered many excuses to try and defend the way the suit is cited, so let's run through those so I can explain why they don't work for me. First is the idea that this version was based on the original Ronin design, and they made the mask look like the one from Freefall through parallel thinking. And to that I say, no. Clearly, no. Look at the mask. The design is nearly identical to the one from Freefall. This mask is one of the most faithful adaptations Rivals has ever done. There is no way these two look this similar purely through coincidence. Secondly, in Freefall, the characters say that the Ronin suit in the story is the exact same one that Clint originally wore. Now, this leads to some interesting questions. Do we listen to what the characters are saying and treat this as the exact same thing as the original design? Or do we use our eyes? Because I don't think the characters' words matter that much when the art so clearly contradicts what they're saying. These kinds of things happen where there's a miscommunication between writer and artist. I remember an issue of Ultimate X-Men where the characters describe Magneto as having a purple cape, even though his cape is red in that book. I would say that something similar is happening here. Thirdly, some have said that citing Ronin as the original version of the suit is still correct since the design from Freefall is still a variation on the original suit. I would heavily disagree with that since I think that the difference in mask is enough to qualify it as a different design, and not just a slight tweak on the original. I mean, just the fact that I can make this distinction should be enough to show that it's a different version of the suit. Finally, there's one thing about the citation in this game that really bothers me. Hawkeye's modern suit, which they cite as first appearing in Hawkeye Freefall, despite the fact that this suit actually debuted in a different book nearly a decade beforehand. So why is this suit cited as being from Freefall, even though it's not, but the Ronin suit isn't, even though it is? Like, I mean, what is the logic here? Now, with all that being said, the question becomes, why is it such an issue that the Ronin suit isn't cited correctly? Well, first, you have the matter of being correct about things, and the other thing is the importance of the actual original Ronin costume. The original design has its own appeal to it, and it would be nice to have that simpler version of the costume. But labeling this suit as the original Ronin design means that it's less likely for the actual original Ronin to ever be added as a skin. Scarlet Witch's Emporium Matron skin is, supposedly, based on her design from 2022's Hellfire Gala, which looked like this. However, the suit's name and the quote associated with it are instead taken from her 2023 solo series, where her outfit looked like this. As you can see, her solo series design and the Hellfire Gala design are pretty similar, the only real difference is the headpiece. However, I would say that's difference enough to label these as two separate designs, especially since I vastly prefer the headpiece from her solo series over the Hellfire Gala one. I think it just looks better on the outfit overall. The problem though is that Rival's Emporium Matron doesn't really look like either of these. Sure, it incorporates some elements from these suits, but it also makes many changes. Instead of listing all the similarities and differences, I can fortunately show you an extremely fair side-by-side comparison. Russell Dodderman, the designer of the original look from the comics, drew the Emporium Matron suit in his style after the suit's reveal. So, putting that drawing next to the artwork of the original design, in the same art style and pose, should allow everyone to see that while this suit does retain elements from the original comics, it is still a fundamentally different design. All of this is made stranger by the existence of Scarlet Witch's Chaos Gown outfit, which is also based off the 2022 Hellfire Gala design. This costume has a much more faithful rendition of the beaded crown, the outfit's top, and the space effect in her hair, although the bottom half of the outfit isn't pulling much from the comics and is really just doing its own thing. Still, in many ways, Chaos Gown is a closer adaptation than Emporium Matron is, but for some reason, Chaos Gown is cited as being a completely new design native to Marvel Rivals, which is just not true? I genuinely don't understand this. You cannot claim this is an original design. Yeah, there's plenty of differences compared to the comic version, but you can say the same thing about Emporium Matron, and that one's cited as being a comic skin. What a bizarre series of decisions. What they should do now is change the citation for Emporium Matron, citing it as being from her solo series and not the Hellfire Gala, then credit Chaos Gown correctly. But what they should have done to begin with is make one full, faithful adaptation of the Hellfire Gala design, and then use the rest of their resources to make a second, different costume. But no, instead we got two adaptations of the same suit. Two half measures, neither of which fully capture the original design from the comics. Magneto's Master of Magnetism skin is based on his classic costume, the one he's had ever since the very first issue of the X-Men comics in 1963. This game cites it as being from Uncanny X-Men 1981, But I looked into this little, and for some reason the original X-Men comics are labeled as being from 1981, even though they were first published in '63. I asked about this online, and the best answer I could find is that the comic was originally titled X-Men, but was rebranded to Uncanny X-Men in 1981. So the comic line is now listed as starting from the rebrand in 1981, despite actually starting in 1963. I say all this because it's kind of a fun fact, but also to clarify that the issue this suit is cited from is the original first X-Men comic, and not a different random one from the 80s. Anyway, so yeah, this costume. It's a cool design, but this is simply not what Magneto's classic suit looked like. There are several major changes here, changing the circular bolts on his chest into spikes, adding huge shoulder pads that have those spikes, giving the suit multiple white elements like the gigantic M on his belt and cape. But what really gets me is the helmet. Again, it looks cool. This is a really unique and innovative redesign of Magneto's helmet. Extending the helmet outline into horns is a genuinely new reinvention that has never been done before on any Magneto design. But that's the whole problem. This is all a new design on something that is supposed to be a classic costume, which completely defeats the point of adapting it in the first place. They absolutely could have stayed much closer to the comic design while updating it slightly to fit into Rival's aesthetic style, but they didn't, and I suspect that the reason they changed it so drastically was to differentiate it from Magneto's default. While it is a really bold redesign, Magneto's default still features some things from his original costume, such as the bolts on the chest and the design of his helmet. Neither of these are exactly the same as his classic design, but they are similar, so I think the people working on Rivals may have been worried that the average player wouldn't want a more faithful, classic Magneto design because they would say it's just a recolor of his default. Which is not an unfounded fear. I've seen a lot of people say that two different outfits with one thing in common are just a recolor, so I kinda get it. But that's just a theory. I don't know for certain if that's why they changed it so much. Regardless, it is incredibly disappointing that Magneto's most iconic costume was changed so drastically and had some of its most iconic elements stripped away. Iron Man's steam power suit is based on this outfit from Marvel 1872. As you can clearly tell, these two armors are completely different. The only common ground between them is the vague idea of being steam-powered. I don't love the original design or anything, I wasn't even aware of its existence until Rivals adapted it, but I do think the design for the comics has its own charm, owed entirely to the design of the helmet. In addition to looking like a cool skull, it's also reminiscent of the vertical grates on the front of older trains. That is really cool and really distinct. Just by looking at this one piece, I can instantly recognize the suit. But Rival's rendition of this costume gives him an entirely different helmet. One that's kinda boring and generic. The only old-timey part about it are the bolts. Without this helmet could be slapped onto any other Iron Man suit and look perfectly normal. This is so disappointing because Rivals makes a lot of good additions here that fit right along with the original design, such as the furnace chest, the pressure gauges on the arms, and the moving gears on the back. I just wish these were all added alongside the incredibly distinct helmet from the comics, instead of replacing it. Next we have Mr. Fantastic's The Maker outfit. The Maker's costume in the comics was exceptionally simple. Just a black bodysuit with his logo and a silver helmet with some blue on it. Rivals has overdesigned the hell out of this suit. I don't mind how the helmet looks, in fact I actually like it a lot. They took out his little mouthpiece, which always looked a little silly to me anyway, but the bodysuit has been completely borked. Adding smaller silver details is fine to make the outfit match his helmet, but they've added such large amounts of gray to his torso for no real reason. This doesn't look right to me at all. The bigger issue is that they screwed up his symbol. Now, I know a lot of you are probably thinking, what the hell is the Maker's symbol even supposed to be? Well, I'll tell you, it's supposed to be a chemical compound. That's what I always assumed it was, but when going through his earlier appearances for this video, I found definitive proof that this is what it's supposed to be. In the Ultimate Disassembled story arc, the Maker and his cronies that wear outfits similar to his had this funny little U symbol on one of the circles. This is the mu symbol, which in chemistry is used to denote a bridging ligand, the ligand that connects two or more atoms in a compound. So there you have it, that's what the maker symbol is supposed to be, a chemical compound. So, tell me why they ruined that in Rivals by shoving a big line down the middle of his center circle. Because now it's not a compound, now it's just some goddamn circles and lines. I suspect that they changed this suit as much as they did because of Charles Xavier. Judging by Chuck's statue on the Krakoa map, it looks like they'll add him in his Krakoa era outfit, which is incredibly similar to the Maker's costume, being composed of a simple black bodysuit and a silver helmet with some blue on it. So maybe they made these changes to make Maker's suit more distinct to try and prevent confusion when they add Xavier as a playable character. If that's true, then I don't like that at all. Just don't use Krakoa Xavier, stick to old reliable wheelchair Xavier, that way you don't have to worry about this at all. Especially since the Maker predates Krakoa Xavier by several years, so why does the Maker have to be the one to change his outfit? He was here first! Anyway, here's a quick edit I made that addresses my issues with the Maker's outfit in Rivals. It's not ideal, since I think the center circle should be placed differently and smaller, but this pretty much gets across what I want. Doctor Strange's spacesuit, this game calls it the Sorcerer Supreme of the Galaxy? I'm not gonna look that up, I think that, I'm pretty sure that's what the game called it. I just call it his spacesuit, I have it written down here as his spacesuit. His spacesuit is a puzzling departure from the design in the comic books. This was a relatively simple and sleek outfit in the comics, so I get that they would want to change it somewhat to fit this game's larger, tankier Strange. Armoring up the black material is fine, but everything else they did is nonsense. The main problem being this silver scrap heap they've added to his shoulders. I genuinely don't get this bit. It doesn't really match anything else on the suit, especially from behind, but I also really hate this because it wasn't at all necessary. Strange's spacesuit already had a large, sharp collar that would have looked distinct, and they instead replaced it with this. They've also added a lot of red elements to the bodysuit, which gets in the way of the simpler black and white color scheme the outfit had in the books. I get that they were trying to make this suit look even more unique and different compared to his default, but they've kind of bungled that here by removing some of the unique aspects the suit already had. There were a lot of white elements like on his palms, arms, and this diamond shape on his back, all of which are gone now. Well, the diamond shape is still present on the suit in the game, but it's black so you can barely see it. And he had these little gold symbols on his soles that I thought were kind of funny, and they're completely absent here too. Oh, but thank God they added a random gold tech wear to his face. Yeah, that's right, I bet a lot of you didn't even notice that he had these. Venom's Space Knight outfit is a total disaster. This one is rare, since in addition to not looking much like its comic counterpart, it also looks worse. The original design from the books was just okay, not my favorite or anything, but it did have a bit of a retro sci-fi anime look to it that I thought was pretty cool, and the bio-armor design of the suit was pretty distinct. Rivals has completely changed the suit here, the more organic looking armor being replaced with a ton of mechanical silver armor pieces and glowing LEDs. And if it was just that, just a change in materials but with the same core design, then that might have been fine. But no, the actual design of the suit is different too. The helmet, symbol, gloves, and boots are all drastically changed from the original comic version. I personally would say that this suit is just straight up worse than the original because of the metal armor and LEDs. In addition to completely changing the vibe of the suit, these things make it way more generic. This looks like it could be Stark Tech Venom or Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. Venom. Honestly, it's kind of hard to tell this is even supposed to be Venom at all. Keeping the more organic armor design from the books, maybe making it similar to the armor detailing on Fortnite's Venom design, would have been far preferable to this. It's also a huge shame that his mouth isn't utilized outside of his MVP animation. This suit with the face armor retracted to show his mouth did look pretty cool in the comics, reminding me of the mass-produced Avas from Evangelion. Or just the Avas in general. So that would have been nice to see in more of his animations, but oh well. Venom's lingering imprint costume is supposed to be Agent Venom. Don't let the bizarre citation of Venom 2018 issue 8 fool you, this is literally just supposed to be Agent Venom who first debuted in 2011. Like, in that 2018 Venom issue, the suit doesn't look any different than it normally does, so I don't know why they credited it as first appearing in that one. Some people have theorized it's because Eddie was wearing the suit in that issue, and like, sure, I guess, but the Space Knight costume that was in the game before this was something Eddie never wore, so what's the deal? Anyway, I have two big issues with this suit. The first is all this yellow crap. I don't think Agent Venom has ever had this on his outfit. And like, what is this even supposed to be? I've made an edit that removes all the yellow bits, and it's amazing how much more I prefer this version, although it still doesn't fix the second issue, which is how the suit moves away from the militaristic design of Agent Venom to instead lean more into the monstrous side of the character. The military aspect is the most distinct part of Agent Venom's design. It's like 95% of the reason someone might like that look in the first place, but it's heavily downplayed here. The Agent Venom suit was already cool and distinct. All they needed to do was copy the suit from the books and make it bigger. That would have been fine. There was no need to do any of this. Penny's Venom mech and plug suit are taken from a different character in the comics, Addie Brock. So this isn't an outfit or mech that Penny herself ever used. However, that shouldn't be used as an excuse for how this suit was adapted, which was poorly. Looking first at the mech itself, the chest symbol is missing the spider head, so now it's just a collection of vaguely spider-leg shaped lines. The ridged, spiked design elements on the shoulder pads and forearms have been removed. I especially dislike how the shoulder pads have been turned into this round cross thing. It just looks weird. The helmet has pincers on it, which is pretty cool, but it comes at the cost of this suit not having the opening mouth it had in the books. As cool as the pincers are, I'd trade them in a heartbeat for this. The biggest departure is the color of the suit. It was a little purpley sometimes in the comics, but it was really dark and mostly just black, you know, like Venom, but they've made it full-on purple here, so that combined with the green lights is a very clear homage to Shinji's mech from Evangelion. I understand why they went this direction since the suit already had green bits in the comics, but the thing is, the Venom mech in the comics was already an Evangelion reference. The black and white coloring and the mech going berserk are inspired by Toji's mech, so I wish they leaned into that more instead of taking the more obvious approach of making it a reference to Shinji's. Then we get to Penny's appearance, and holy god, what happened? I assume this is supposed to be adapting Addie's suit, so why does it look almost nothing like it? Once again, they've chosen to adapt the color black as purple instead. The suit is missing the spider symbol, and the weirdest part here is her hair. Why does Penny have braided pigtails? That's not what Addie's hairstyle looked like. It's not what Penny's hair looked like in that story. So why did they do this? Genuinely, huh? So with all this, I think you can see how drastically different the Venom mech and Penny's suit are compared to the comic version. Also, just like with Venom's Space Knight suit, I have to emphasize what a missed opportunity it is not to include the functional mouth of the suit in certain animations. This one doesn't even have it in the MVP screen. It's so lame. Namor's Savage Submariner skin is taken from issue 67 of the 1968 Savage Submariner book, where it looked like this. This was a very simple look, so I understand making some changes to try and jazz it up a bit, but Rivals took things way too far. Coloring the suit with turquoise is a strange decision, because I get that it ties into Namor's default color scheme and it's kinda similar to his original green trunks, but the suit in the books was not that color. It was black, although just like many other black costumes in older comics, it was shaded with blue, so it looked blue most of the time. But once again, same issue as the Punisher 2099 suit, why make it a greenish color when you could have just made it blue? Then there's the even bigger problem, these three pieces here on his shoulder, forearm, and head. I really don't get what the thought process was with these. The outfit in the books was simple, sure, but there was an appeal to its sleekness, an appeal that was completely lost with the addition of these pieces. Regardless of whether or not you think these additions make the suit look worse, which I do, I think it makes it look worse. You have to admit that between these and the difference in color, this has been altered into an unrecognizable outfit. I've gone ahead and made an edit of the suit, removing these pieces on the arm, shoulder, and head, recoloring it to be blue as well as a black version, and I would personally remove the gold spikes here if I could, but that's outside of my editing abilities for now. Something like this would have been acceptable as an adaptation of the suit. It captures the main idea of the costume while still changing it a bit to look more modern and stuff. Honestly, I was kind of upset after making this because I think it looks really cool, and then I remembered what the suit actually looks like in the game, and Iron Fist's immortal weapon of Agamotto is based on his white and gold outfit from the New Avengers book. Do I even have to explain how this one is different? I mean, just look at it. Now, I want to be very clear here. I actually like the suit from Rivals more than the outfit from the comics, but that doesn't mean that there is no problem here. These are two completely different outfits. The suit from the books was really simple and kind of boring. I get that. I get wanting to improve it by adding some stuff here and there, but they've changed it so much that it's just not the same thing anymore. It doesn't have the same core idea. This is supposed to be a more modern, more conventional superhero suit in contrast to Danny's classic Iron Fist costume that was very extra. That idea has been completely thrown out here, replaced with something else entirely. Again, I like the suit in Rivals, but I like it because it is such a different thing compared to what was in the comic books. I mean, what exactly is even being adapted here? The white and gold colors? The name? The red energy is loosely adapting Danny getting red eyes when he was briefly possessed by Agamotto in one of the Fear Itself tie-ins. That's kinda it. Like stuff like the mask and the symbol on his chest are the same on most of Danny's Iron Fist costumes, so I'm not counting that, but I guess you could. I know that it might sound weird for me to be complaining about this when I like the Rivals design more than the comic one, but it's a matter of principle. It's a matter of respecting the original artist, and Rivals just does not do that here. This should have been labeled as an original design. That way, a more faithful adaptation of the comic suit could be made in addition to this one. It's actually a recolor of a green outfit he wore earlier, so they could even include that too, with the customization option they have now. I think Rivals' Immortal Weapon of Agamotto design could and should coexist alongside the one from the comics, but it has instead replaced it, and that is a problem. I have one more costume to talk about and really dig into, but before that I'll list some honorable mentions, suits that aren't as bad as the rest of these, but still make one or two odd decisions that screw things up a bit. Magic's Eldritch armor omits the helmet from the comics, which is a shame. I think that was probably the best part of the suit there, since the rest of the outfit was really bland. I especially like how the helmet had open space in it for her horns to come through when she went demon mode, something this game could have utilized. But the helmet's been replaced here with a floating fiery crown, which is cool, but is it worth the loss of the helmet? Could this crown element not have been saved for a different original design instead? The Thing's iconic trench coat looks mostly good except for two little things, the camera hanging around his neck and the satchel on his back carrying a notebook and pen. These transform the outfit from its original intent of a sullen disguise into a cool, fun private investigator, completely missing the point of what this outfit was supposed to be. Captain America's Hellfire Gala outfit is really good, one of their best adaptations from the comics. However, they've made his shield silver and gold instead of the typical red, white, and blue. I'm sure they did this to try and make the suit stand out a little more, but this outfit severely lacks red on the back, so in gameplay you're just looking at a solid block of blue. This is something the classic shield could have helped with, but they just had to take out all the color. Storm's Goddess of Thunderskin is pretty cool, getting the core style of the design right. The issue though is with the colors. The colors of the suit are almost completely inverted compared to the books, with silver armor and blue hair instead of blue armor and white hair. Which is such an odd choice to make, especially with the hair. I like the design of it, it's like a big poofy cloud. But clouds are white, not blue. So why did they color the suit like this? Now we have our last costume. I've saved it for last, not because it's the worst adaptation or the ugliest, but because it's the most bizarre and needlessly different adaptation that takes the design in such a strange direction that I legitimately cannot understand why they would do this while still claiming it as the same costume from the comic books. The suit I'm referring to is, of course, Joe Fixit. In the comics, Joe Fixit was Banner's Grey Hulk form that became a Las Vegas casino enforcer. He wore a suit and a hat. That was kinda it. Pretty simple but effective getup. Seeing the monstrously large, often barely clothed Hulk in a suit and tie has a certain novelty to it, and the old-fashioned gangster look is nice too. Put those two things together and yeah, that's a cool look for the character. So, why did Rivals decide to give him Cyberpunk 2077 tech implants? Why does he have Thanos' chin lines? Why did they choose to make the lines on his arms blue if all of his effects are still green? This tech stuff is least noticeable on Banner since less of his skin is exposed, but you can still see it on his hands and head, and he looks pretty bad from behind, like the stuff on his head just does not look good at all. Then there's his Monster Hulk form, which is even worse. Why does he have a Metal Gear Rising Revengeance jaw? Why does he have the Sandevistan? Fix-It has never been depicted like this. Hulk as a character has rarely been depicted like this. The only example of Hulk with cybernetic implants that comes to mind for me is Starship Hulk, and the less said about that the better, so I really don't understand why they chromed him out. Every other suit I've gone through in this video, I can at least sort of understand why they made the changes they did, but I genuinely cannot see the logic here. Hulk in a suit is already a fun enough concept that you don't really have to add much to it. Maybe some extra detailing on his clothes, some jewelry, but that's it. The gold rings they gave him, those are good. But the cyberware is way too much. It doesn't really do much for the gangster vibe, it actively moves away from the more old-fashioned vintage appeal of the suit. And of course the biggest issue here is that it fundamentally alters what this outfit is. It's no longer Hulk in a suit, it's now teched out Hulk in a suit, which is a different thing. If this was labeled as an original skin like Joe Fix-It 2099 or Joe Circuit or something, and we had a more traditional version of Fix-It as well, then this would be no problem. But labeling this as the Joe Fix-It is a flat out lie. This suit stands as the ultimate example of the problems Rivals has when adapting costumes from the comic books, and I hope to God that no other suit gets adapted like this ever again. Those are all what I believe are the worst adaptations of comic costumes in Marvel Rivals. Hopefully I've done a good job showing my problems with them, and why it matters. The biggest reason why this matters is, of course, future costumes. If we let this kind of thing slide now, then they'll keep doing it in the future, and I really don't want that to happen. There are plenty of costumes from the comics that I really like and think look really cool. They barely need any adjustments to work in this type of game, and I want them to be adapted faithfully in a way that retains what made me like them in the first place. But Rivals rarely does this, instead choosing to add new elements to suits that clash with the original design, or to reimagine the entire thing as a completely different design with barely any ties to the source. Or sometimes they'll just cite things strangely, which isn't as big of an issue, but still. For now, I think most people are fine with how Rivals handles comic suits because A, most of the adapted suits aren't very popular, and B, the end result still looks cool. I understand that, but what happens when they do this sort of thing to a costume you do care about? For example, what if they do Spider-Man's black suit and completely change it? What if they give him a different symbol, and little venom heads poking out on the suit, maybe give him a big shoulder pad with teeth on them? Oh, but they would never do that. Wouldn't they? Oh, but that suit's so simple, no way they could screw that up. Just look at the Namor skin I talked about. In the comics, that was just a black vest, black pants, and a belt. And look at what they did to it. Oh, but Symbiote Spider-Man's too popular, too iconic, they'd never screw with that. Dude, Magneto's classic design is the most popular and iconic look the character has ever had. It's the look that pops into most people's heads when they hear the name Magneto. No redesign has ever stuck for very long with him. They always end up going back to his classic suit because of how popular and iconic and timeless that design is. And look at what Rivals did to it. That's why we have to push back on these things now. If you have even one costume from the comics that you're a fan of, then you can't afford to sit back and not care. Because if they adapted these suits like this, there's a good chance they'll adapt the ones you like in the same way. Obviously, not all of Rivals' comic adaptations are bad. I will be making another video highlighting what I think are the best comic adaptations Rivals has made, and that video will be a lot shorter since there aren't that many good ones. I won't be making any videos discussing the costumes from the MCU, because all of those look pretty much the same as they do in their source material. I mean, there are some changes, sure, but they're really minor, and they're just like color changes, proportion changes, or changes to how form-fitting they are. So if I did make a video on them, it would just be going over those same 3 things over and over again, which wouldn't be fun for me to make, and I promise it would not be that fun for you to watch. I don't think I'll be making any videos discussing their original designs because I just don't care for them. Some of them look good, but most of them just make me shrug. And I think it should be clear by now that I'm not going to make videos per character going through all of their outfits like I did with other games. Since Rivals is a live service that is actually alive, they're going to be constantly adding stuff, making any video in that style immediately outdated, unless I wait for the game to die, which is probably over a decade away. So I decided to make this video because comic books are important, how they're adapted is important. I understand that nobody else cares about comic books, that most people see them as nonsensical, insignificant rags printed for children. But let's keep in mind that it's because of those rags that we have any of this to begin with, so I think they deserve at least a little bit of respect. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you next time!